Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the podcast from New York City. I have Jon Stamell, and he is a global branding expert, and he's going to talk to us all about his journey, his transition to helping clients and customers brand themselves. He's also going to talk about major lessons learned and how he sees the future, where technology is going, and it's all going to be a very personal conversation. And I'm really happy to have John on. So welcome, John.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Great to be here.
Yeah. I know you what's interesting is we connected and you have a personal touch to your journey. Talk a little bit about it and then we'll talk about what you do for clients.
I think personally, I've never believed in boundaries or in limits. I think that you can always think about something that you might not otherwise attain if you hemmed yourself in. And I think that has opened up some great opportunities for me around the world. And I've literally done business around the world. And I think if I had a much more closed mindset, that would not have happened.
Yeah, fascinating. And one thing we'll talk about is we'll talk the number one thing that clients come to you for, if there was one like frustration, pain point, aspiration, what do they come to you for and how do you help them?
Today, and this has evolved and changed over the years, but today primarily because they're trying to understand their customers and to gain customer insights and to be able to engage with their customers based on what their customers are telling them, what their customers' perceptions of their company are. And so we have a marketing platform that enables brands to ask customers questions in a number of different ways. It's not, it can be market research, but it isn't always that way. There are other ways to engage with them. And then the brands on our platform can create personas around each customer based on their interests, needs, perceptions, motivations, emotions, and can then engage with them with content that is specific to what every individual needs.
Yeah. And then, so then a follow-up question I have for you is you talk about in terms of branding is all about marketing and you talk about the coming transition from transactional marketing and now we're in relationship marketing and how is AI going to change this dynamic?
Okay, so I would change my definition of branding a little bit or say what it's about. I think it's really about understanding customers and understanding what they want from you and then being able to match that with what you offer. When you get to AI, what AI enables you to do is to accumulate massive amounts of customer insights and then categorize them. And then, if you have the right technology, to append those categories to each individual's data file so
Oh.
that you can then segment them based on not just what they believe, but why they believe it, because that's what's really important.
We have you mentioned how and why clients come to you. And so your process of because obviously you want to have a good fit. And so what are the top 2 questions that you always ask your clients to determine, and what does that tell you when they based on the response?
Of course, we wanted them to describe their business, but I think it's really understanding what their pain points are. Well, what is working, what isn't working, and why? And then can we help them? Does our platform work for them? Do we have the experience in their business that will also help them and then solving those challenges?
Interesting. And, so the other question is, what makes you different from other marketers, and what do marketers often miss about their customers?
I think there's a tendency of a lot of marketers to work by rote or work by a specific formula that's been out there for a while. And we tend to be a little bit more creative in opening up the possible solutions to people. Keep in mind, there's always an internal bias within any company and within any organization as to what they believe the market thinks and what they believe the market wants. But it's really hit or miss then. If you're big enough, if you're Amazon, you can do a lot of guesswork just simply based on past behavior people have bought and how they interact with your platform. But if you're a small to medium sized company, you don't have that luxury. And so you really need to go get out there in the market and find out. Back when I went to business school, a professor, I believe at Harvard or Stanford, who wrote a lot, Peter Drucker, had an expression which was managed by walking around. And what he had in mind was basically asking people what they thought, what they wanted, and then taking his own ideas and matching those to what the customers wanted. If you go back to the founding of Walmart, Sam Walton was famous for going to the stores and being a greeter at the door and talking to people and asking them what they wanted. So now with technology today, we're able to do that on a much larger scale, but also to keep people individuals so that we can engage in individual conversations at scale.
And what's the number one thing you tell your clients?
Be creative, ask questions. I think asking is much more important than telling, and always look outside yourself for what the answers are.
Mm, interesting. So the other questions is you talk about why consumer interest, needs, and perceptions are more important than past behavior. Why?
It's I believe it's better to know what your customers want today and aspire to tomorrow than what they did in the past. You What they did in the past can be of some help as to what they might purchase or experience or do, but really listening to them as to here's where I'm going, here's where I want to be next year, or the year after. And I think that if you plan your marketing based on those kinds of factors, you're going to be more successful.
Hmm. Wow. So, we'll kind of transition from what you do and this the more personal. If you had three, you have to list three things you've learned in life. What would they be?
Take risks, always ask questions, and be as creative as you possibly can.
Mm, interesting. You also talk about you were smuggled into a South American country and bribed out and facing down soldiers amid a foreign country's upheaval. What did you learn from that, or what did you take away from that experience?
I think certainly those 3 points that you just asked me about all apply in those situations, and you mix 2 different situations there, but on the first one was I'll so that I don't offend any countries, I'll leave the name of the country out. But I was asked to speak at a large business conference in a foreign country, and I did not know and was not told by the conference organizers that I needed a visa to get into the country. So that when I was about to get on my flight in South America to go into that country, I was told that I need a visa, didn't have it. I called the conference organizers, they said they would have somebody come and pick me up. And so they drove me 6 hours through the night into that country. We were not stopped. We came close because they would have wanted to see my visa. And but of course I had to get out of the country. And so I had to after the conference, so I had to show a visa. And the people that took me to the airport basically bribed the customs officials to stamp my passport and let me in. And I was really concerned as to how much that was going to cost. They asked me how much money I had. I had recently been in Europe and I had around 400 euros in my pocket, and I only had around 80 or $90. And it turned out that the customs was not interested in the euros. They only wanted dollars, and they took $60 to stamp my passport. Uh, that was the first story. But there was one point where I landed on the border in this small town, and the airport actually shut down and turned off the lights because it was the last flight of the night. And my suitcase had not arrived either with me. And I was sitting on the curb looking at a town that was way off in the distance and just wondering, I've had a great career and now I'm sitting here in the middle of nowhere. I don't know if anyone's going to pick me up. What's happened here? And told the story to a lot of friends, and they've all said when they were asked to show their visa, they would have turned around and headed back to the US right then. So that was certainly taking a risk. And of course, I had to ask a lot of questions and be creative along the way. The other one that you referred to actually took place in Chile. And it was in 1989, 88, when Pinochet was still in power. And I was asked to help the Chilean salmon industry develop a strategy for growing their business around the world. And when I got there, there were troops at the airport. There were demonstrations from labor unions that day. And I was told to go up into my hotel. I would be picked up before our meeting. I went up to my room in the hotel. I put a 300 millimeter lens on my camera and I ran out in the streets. And at a certain point, there were tear gas canisters landing near me. And so I ran right into somebody from the military who looked at me and said, if you value your head and your camera, you will get out of here fast. And I did. But that, of course, was taking a risk, possibly stupidly, but it was a great adventure and one that I think that I learned from and that I think a lot of people would probably shy away from.
Interesting. And so relating it back to brand builder, have how it sounds like you've very had a very storied and interesting life. How have all of your adventures related to your work as a brand builder?
I think when we have a lot of personal stories, whether they're about adventures we've had, people we've met that have become role models, let's say, I think all of those add to your own personal brand. Look, if you've got nothing to say, but maybe what you learned in business school, you really don't have much of a brand. So your brand is really because those stories come out in your personality. And that's true of companies too. What's their story and how is that different from others? I haven't met anyone other than me that was bribed into a country and or smuggled into a country and bribed out. So that certainly adds to my brand.
Yeah, interesting. The other question is this idea of the problem with a lot of people is this analysis paralysis. And so you have planning versus just do it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I've done a lot of business in Chile over the years, and it's a country of engineers. Typically, you you don't have a lot of MBAs there. You do now. That has changed, but it used to be that you get a civil engineering degree, and that was the training for business. And of course, if you're an engineer, what do? You plan. You create designs. You always look for the perfect design because it should be flawless as an engineer. But that's going to keep you from acting. And that's going to keep you from getting feedback from the market. Sure, you got a plan, but you've also got to get out there and see how people react.
Oh, interesting. Another follow-up question I have for you is this believe talk about what your thoughts are on AI and because you have some people are scared of it. They're and some people but you talk about the best thing AI can do for you.
I think there are a couple things to keep in mind with AI. One is it has no empathy. And two, it has no sense of humor. So it, it's only going to adopt what you give it in a prompt. Now, I just wrote an article that I posted on LinkedIn. And if you get our newsletter, you'll see about writing the art of writing prompts. And I use jokes as an example because if you ask AI, tell me a joke, what comes out is just garbage. And so you have to give it a reference point. You have to describe a style. AI is nothing to be afraid of unless you cannot write a prompt. The art is all in writing the prompt. And so, that's a very important part. And the other thing is if you ask AI to do some writing for you, edit it and adapt your own style to it. Don't just send it out because it's very easy to tell that something was written by AI.
Yeah. Yeah, so very interesting. And the next question I have for you is with this idea of to end it out, what do you always tell your kids? Leave something inspiring for the audience and how people can find you and connect with you and follow you.
And when my kids were growing up, I often told them, don't do anything I would do. And a lot of that is because you get concerned about the safety of your kids. And when I've done things, a couple of which I mentioned, and some like almost falling off a 100-foot waterfall, sailing through a hurricane in the Atlantic, those are things that I have done. And I'm here, but you don't necessarily, as a parent, want your kids to go out and do that. But I think it's important to be different. I think it's important to always ask why not just what.
Yeah.
And I think creativity is very important.
Yeah. Excellent. How can people find you and connect with you and follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so that's certainly one way. My company is called Umiji, which is OOMIJI.com. The word Omiji, it's a derivative of Omiji, is a Japanese word that translates to get a view. And that's basically what you get on that platform. So those are the basic ways. You can also email me at John, Jon, not John, at umiji.com.
Excellent. Thanks again, and thanks for a wonderful conversation.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it.